Welcome to this explainer. Okay, so if you've been filling up your tank lately, you've definitely felt the tension, right? Today, we are unpacking a massive energy standoff that's literally rewriting the entire North American economy.
Let's jump right into the big question hanging over Washington and the global markets. For decades, the US-Canada energy relationship has been incredibly reliable, but recent political moves have completely flipped the script. So, what actually happens when America's biggest oil supplier just says no?
To understand the sheer scale of the panic here, you have to realize that Canada supplies a staggering 62% of all U.S. oil imports. Mexico, Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, add them all up, and they're just a tiny fraction of what Canada delivers to us every single day.
Section 1. The North American Oil Standoff.
So, what sparked this whole powder keg? Well, with U.S. President Trump threatening crazy energy tariffs, we're talking anywhere from 10 to 100%, Prime Minister Mark Carney essentially froze Washington by rejecting those demands and pushing a completely different strategy. It is a high-stakes geopolitical chess match, for sure.
Moving to Section 2, America's heavy crude addiction.
Now, you might be wondering, why doesn't the U.S. just bypass the tariffs and buy oil from somebody else? Well, it's not that simple. Midwest U.S. refineries have spent billions, literally billions, customizing their facilities specifically for heavy Canadian crude. This stuff is dense, it's sour, and it's acidic. It's kind of like a car engine built specifically for diesel. You can't just pour in standard unleaded gas without completely wrecking the machine. They are locked in. Because of this highly specialized diet, Canada is practically the only cook in the kitchen. If those Midwest refineries don't get Canadian oil, they either run at a massive loss or they shut down completely. It makes the U.S. incredibly vulnerable right now.
Which brings us to Section 3, the Line 5 ticking clock.
Right as this political tension is peaking, there's a massive physical infrastructure crisis threatening to sever the supply line entirely. Enbridge's Line 5 pipeline, which pumps all this critical fuel straight into the U.S. Midwest, has turned into an absolute legal nightmare. It's basically a domino effect of legal chaos. It started with a Michigan state lawsuit in 2019, escalated to a federal judge ordering a 3-year shutdown, and now there's a 2026 U.S. Supreme Court ruling sending it back to state court. All of this is culminating in a looming June 2026 deadline to actually remove parts of the pipeline in Wisconsin, which is just squeezing an already fragile supply chain.
Section 4, Canada's pivot to REJA.
Here is the massive plot twist. Canada isn't just sitting around waiting for the U.S. to shut off the valve. Prime Minister Carney is aggressively pivoting, calling this a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to serve as a gateway to the world's fastest-growing markets. Canada is positioning itself to be an independent global energy superpower. Using the newly completed Trans Mountain expansion pipeline, they just added nearly 600,000 barrels per day of capacity straight to the Pacific coast. So instead of being trapped by these proposed U.S. tariffs, Canada can rapidly take advantage of global pricing. And here is what's really fascinating. 2/3 of these crude exports are now flowing directly to the Asia-Pacific market, mostly bypassing the U.S. West Coast entirely. They are actively feeding China's growing thirst for heavy crude and securing massive new customers. Section 5. Bypassing the United States. To further uncouple from the U.S. and protect their assets, Canada is looking inward. Tapping into the massive reserves of the Western Canada Sedimentary Basin, Alberta and Ontario have officially unveiled the Northern Shield Energy Corridor. This is a super bold proposal to move up to 800,000 barrels of heavy crude per day entirely domestically. We are talking about a staggering 3,300 kilometers of pipeline, stretching from Hardisty, Alberta, all the way to Sarnia, Ontario. It bypasses U.S. territory completely. It's a direct physical response to the threat of cross-border tariffs. The Northern Shield isn't just about moving oil, either. It's a very calculated 3-step power move. Step 1, secure the domestic supply chain. Step 2, establish Canada's first-ever strategic petroleum reserve. And Step 3, expand access to global tidewater ports. It's all about achieving total energy security while just ignoring U.S. demands.
Finally, Section 6, who pays the price?
Let's bring this back home and see who actually absorbs the shockwaves of this breakup. The math is pretty brutal. A 10% U.S. tariff completely wipes out Canada's historical price advantage. Plus, if pipeline capacity gets strained, that oil has to move by rail, which is wildly expensive.
That severely squeezes the profit margins of those specialized Midwestern refineries that literally have nowhere else to go for heavy crude.
And here is the harsh reality for everyday consumers like us. While the tariff funds might flow into the U.S. Treasury, you are the one covering the difference. When refineries pay more for raw materials due to tariffs, they pass that cost right down the line. Ultimately, it lands squarely at your local gas pump.
So, I leave you with this final thought. As these two intertwined economies drift apart in a high-stakes game of chicken, who is really winning the energy war? Will this uncoupling actually lead to a more secure energy future, or are we just permanently locking in higher prices at the pump?